resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto. It's
and
Monday.
Today we're talking
Happy
about,
Monday,
Monday.
Max.
Happy Monday. Sure. Today we're going to talk about something that happened back in May, but kind of got overshadowed, to use it gently, overshadowed by the George Floyd protests. This was a case in Arizona. A man, his name Ryan Whitaker. He answered his door late at night with a gun in his hand, like so many people do. But what he didn't know is that the people pounding on his door were police officers. He knelt down once he realized that they were police and started putting his hands up. But at that point, the police had already seen a gun and they shot him. And he actually, the reports say that he was shot in the back by a police officer he probably didn't even know was there. It's a really, really sad, tragic case. We had heard about this in May. It got some press, but they hadn't released the footage yet. And at that point, it was a he said, she said. His girlfriend, I think at the time, or wife, I think girlfriend, at the time, said that he did nothing wrong. The police said that he lunged at them with a gun. So it kind of just became that he said, she said, and it got drowned out by the George Floyd shooting. Well, in late July, they released the body camera footage. And Joe, I will tell you, it is so egregious. I cannot believe that no one has been charged yet.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So I've talked about this before. I think we have to have a conversation, an honest, open conversation, where it's not just where we're not 100% defending the police and defending law enforcement, defending the DA's office and defending the judges, but we're not backing the blue. Like, we're not backing those good officers that are in positions of trust and authority to defend and protect our communities. And Max, we talked right before we came on. We talked about how we've talked about this many times before. How I'm absolutely torn. I'm torn by, wanting to hold my brother's killer accountable, because my brother was murdered by a police officer.
Yeah.
And this young man who was killed by a police officer. And frankly, there's cases like this that happen every year across the United States. And that's what happens when you have 330 million people in the United States, is you're going to have bad actors and you're going to have mistakes that are made too. But what we need to be talking about, and what is important, is that somewhere in between this line, that we actually have a discussion about that isn't so finite. It isn't so black or white, because the problem is not black or white. But I can, in one hand, in the last couple months, tell you about cases that have happened where the police have literally either given themselves a free pass or made excuses for their behavior. And we can even go back to what happened when they were hunting someone in Los Angeles and they lit up a truck, right? 30 gunshots through a truck, wounding 3 people, and nobody was charged in that case either. So we have accountability issue. And I think that's why we're talking about this today, is let's not pretend that everything is hunky-dory, but let's not defend the police. We have to defend the police.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the reason that we're talking about this today is I posted this story on our social media page, on our Facebook page. Anyone who isn't already following or liking our Facebook page, go to facebook.com/conservative daily. I posted the story on, and we started getting really heated responses from people saying, don't you back police officers? Don't you back the blue? How could you possibly take this position? And we're going to play the entirety of, it's an edited version, but that's what they released, the body camera footage. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, anyone who watches this body camera footage and concludes that what the police did here was justified, that this was a good shoot, feel free to call us up. 888-441-1121, because I'm not seeing it. I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah. So here, And I think, Max, that the reality of it is that, look, we can't just take the popular position as a line in the sand. We can't. Our communities are just not that black and white. It's just not. So having a discussion about what's really going on is that we have to be able to have an honest dialogue. We have to be talking about this, people. And I want you to share it. I want you to share it because, look, the loony left, which represents that 10, 15%, are trying to delegitimize the police. They're trying to delegitimize what we are as a country. That's what they're doing. And it's probably bigger than that 15%, but I'm going to say 15% because 100% of statistics are made up on the spot. So, but if we don't have the discussion collectively and be introspective, we are likely to put ourselves in a position where we miss what is absolutely necessary in order to protect our communities. It can get too far to where they get away with a lot of things. And then if we're not willing to police ourselves, we're not willing to hold them accountable, then that 15% fringe will continue to gain momentum as people idolize individual events that, frankly, like this one, are just egregious.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this happened back in May. This has gotten very little news coverage. It's gotten some local news coverage in Phoenix because the George Floyd shooting overshadowed it. Right? We had nationwide riots because a guy high on fentanyl resisted arrest. Nationwide riots. People have died. Properties, businesses burned to the ground as a result of it. This guy, as we're about to show, was shot and killed in his doorway for answering the door, holding a gun, not pointing it at people, but keeping it down at his side. Police officers determined that was a threat. Now, the reason this really hits home to me is I've answered the door with a gun before when people are pounding on the door late at night. When I used to live in an apartment complex, people are pounding, people are drunk, think they have the wrong address. Yeah, if they're pounding at the door, you grab your gun. I think the issue here is that, first of all, as we'll go through, the 911 call that was made was bogus. It was filed as a domestic violence call, but the person calling was complaining about a noise complaint and only said that it was domestic violence in the hope of getting officers there faster. So it was a bogus complaint. And as we're about to hear on this first clip, the police officers knew it was a bogus complaint. They knew it was. They absolutely knew it was a bogus complaint. You can hear them laughing about how the person who called 911 was just saying yes to all the questions to get them there faster. So they went into this knowing that it was bogus, that this wasn't actually a bona fide domestic violence situation. But as we'll see, the police did a lot of things wrong, and ultimately they shot and killed someone for the crime of answering his door with a gun. So let's go ahead and start playing the footage. I want to, again, reiterate what Joe said, though. Please do hit the like button. Please do hit the share button. Please do comment. This story has not received enough coverage. I think part of the reason is because the victim is white. If we're just going to call a spade, I think that's part of the reason. If a black man had been shot and killed by police standing in his doorway, being shot in the back, I think it would have been national news. I think we would have had riots all over the place. I do think a part of this is the fact that the victim is white. Sorry, it seems pretty obvious.
And I think that we have to, when we tell you to share this, obviously we're being throttled. We're going to have tough conversations. We're going to actually go and talk about things that are tough to talk about, right? We are for America, right? We are for making sure that we maintain moral and ethical principles in this country, right? And the freedoms that we have and the constitutional integrity that we should all enjoy, right? So by sharing it, you're allowing other people to hear this. And you may not agree with us. You may not. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't.
And if you don't agree, if you don't agree, call it 888-441-1121. We'd love to talk to you, because when we watch this, we're seeing something very clear, that this was not a justified shooting. If you watch this footage that we're about to play and you disagree, call in 888-441-1121.
Or even if you do, call in, right?
Yeah, either way. So let's go ahead. Let's play the first clip. This is of the police approaching the apartment complex. And if you listen, you can hear the police joking about how the person who called 911 was just saying whatever he thought would get there faster, would get the police there faster. And that speaks to the officer's frame of mind, because they were going into this knowing that the domestic violence call they were responding to was likely bogus. Let's go ahead and play cut one.
Copy.
This is either it or I'm lost.
In reference to that 240 on Van Buren, the subject should be a Hispanic male, 19 years old, medium height, 135 pounds.
Building number would be nice.
14 on it.
you like all that helpful info we got from our complainant? It's gonna be on this side.
So they're joking about the helpful info they got from the 911 caller. And it goes mute here from time to time because they have to blur out things and mute things that they're not letting the public hear.
I'm just gonna answer yes to all the questions. Get the officers out here faster. I don't have time for this. Yeah, great, thanks. Phoenix Police!
So, a couple takeaways. As we mentioned, you can hear them joking, saying, "I go, what do you think of the call we got in?" Answering yes to all the questions to try and get police there faster, and I don't have time to answer questions. Joking about it, like they understood that this was not a legitimate domestic violence call. Someone calling and saying that the person downstairs is murdering his wife or a significant other. They knew it wasn't real. Second takeaway is the only time you actually hear them identify themselves as police officers is immediately after they pounded on the door and said, "Phoenix Police." Then you watch as they step away from the door. The one officer steps back around the corner, and the other one goes against the side of the wall, both out of view from the peephole, making it impossible for anyone to look through the peephole and see who was there. Joe, I think that part of the reason that this is hitting so close to home, I don't know if you noticed this watching this, but that floor plan of that apartment building is the same floor plan of the apartment building I lived in.
Yep. You lived in.
The door they knocked on, the door they knocked on was the first floor, but it was the same location in that building that I lived in on the second floor, right next to the stairwell. So when I see cops walking up there, cops have knocked on my door before.
Right.
They've knocked on my door before. And when I watch that, I can't help but think that I could have easily been in that position. Hearing a knock on the door late at night, look through people, can't see anyone, walk out just with a handgun at my side, not pointed at anyone, at my side, just to peek and see what's going on. So I think that's why this is hitting me so hard, is because I can literally see myself in that situation because I lived in that same kind of floor plan.
Right.
So let's go ahead and play the second clip. This is where the shooting happens. And I just want to preface this by the official story that we got from police before this body camera footage came out, was that the man, Ryan Whitaker, whipped open the door and lunged at police with a gun. We're going to play this. We'll probably play this a couple times, but watch and ask yourself whether that official narrative is true. Let's go ahead and play cut 2.
How you doing? Whoa! Put your hands! Holy back away from the gun.
Wow.
So what just happened?
He just went down
They
the ground.
knocked on the door.
You saw it was cops?
They knocked on the door. They screamed police. His significant other says that he didn't hear him, that they were playing video games. It was loud. He didn't hear who was at the door. The minute he opens the door, what happens? The cop shines a flashlight in his eyes. Doesn't say, "Police, how's it going?" He just says, "How's it going?" Right? Shining a flashlight in the guy's eyes. The guy takes a step out. We'll play it again. You can see the handgun is at his side. It's not up pointing at anyone. It's at his side. The officers claim, as we'll hear later in the video, that they yelled gun. But they never actually yelled gun. The officer yelled hands. So there's a lot of inconsistencies here. Let's go ahead and play it one more time, and then I'll get your take on it, Joe. Let's play cut 2 one more time.
How you doing? Whoa! Put your hands! Holy back away from the gun.
Unbelievable.
That man was shot in the back, on his knees, putting his hands up. And the only reason he didn't do it sooner is he didn't know it was police, and the cops were shining a flashlight in his eyes. What do you think, Joe?
I'm angry. Like I'm watching this and I'm just getting more and more angry. And the reason why I'm angry is because he puts his hand up like he's telling him, "Look, I'm putting my hand up, right? I'm going to the ground." He gets down on the ground, right? He's doing everything that he should have done in order to comply, right? and he was shot. And he wasn't shot with him facing him. He was shot in the back. Right?
Yeah.
And man, I am, whew.
He did nothing wrong. He
I
did nothing wrong.
watched this, and I want to tell everyone that's listening and watching, right? I don't give a crap if you decide you wanted to back the blue 100%. You can't. You can't back this type of behavior. You can't. It's not possible.
I don't even consider this back the blue. Mary wrote in just a bunch of punk-ass bad cops. That might be true. They might have also just made a mistake. But that doesn't mean that they're absolved of any criminal liability.
Neither would we. We wouldn't be absolved from it.
Ray Muller writes in on Facebook, the police are just people. There are good ones and bad ones, and those in the middle, neither good and bad. You're right.
100%.
You're right. There are good cops, there are bad cops. I don't know whether these are bad cops. This could be something as simple as the police officer made a mistake. But when average citizens make mistakes and shoot people in a mistake, they don't just get off scot-free, right?
100%.
And that's what's so concerning here. There is not a police manual in the country where you can show me that officers are taught to shoot a suspect going to his knees and putting his hands up. You just can't find it, right? It doesn't exist. So there's lots of talk in the country about qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is the idea that if you're doing your job the way you're supposed to, you can't be sued individually if you made a mistake, right? And that's to protect police officers from losing their house, losing their kids' college fund because they make a mistake on the job, making a good faith effort to do their job. I don't see this as a good faith effort. I don't see how this cop could have been trained that when someone walking out of their door in legal possession of a firearm, not brandishing it just at their side, goes to the ground on his knees and puts his hand up, that the way to go is to shoot him in the back. I just don't see it. And again, anyone who sees this differently, the police said that he lunged at them,
which is not true.
And brought a gun out.
It's not true.
I mean, the only way you describe a lunge is if you're talking like football practice where you do lunges where you get on your knees, right? That's the only lunge. He was getting on his knees. So anyone who disagrees, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you because I don't see it. I don't see how this could possibly be a good shoot. So if you disagree, call in 888-441-1121. No, he was getting down on his knees, and he was shot. The officer never actually said police, never actually said gun. It was just a bunch of screaming, flashlight being shined in the guy's eyes. He still had the wherewithal to get down on his knees and put his hands up, but it didn't matter. He was shot in the back by a police officer he probably didn't even know was there.
At all. Didn't even see him.
And again, this could all have been solved by the police officer standing back in full view of the people.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
His significant other said that he went to the door, looked through the door, didn't see anyone there, and grabbed his handgun just in case it was someone trying to hurt him. So
which is reasonable. Which is reasonable.
They were treating this like a raid. The officer that shot him was standing all the way to the side of the door against a wall. Impossible to see him. The other one was around a corner, kind of dipping over a corner.
Guys, hit the share button. I want everybody to hit the share button. Let's share it. Let's break Facebook and share it. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's have an honest conversation, and let's have people call up, or you can just put your comments in the comment section, and we'll continue to read them. Right? But let's not pretend this doesn't happen. Let's not pretend that and let's back up for a minute. You said it, Max. You said it probably the best way to say it, and that is we're not saying they're bad cops. They make a mistake, but when I make a mistake, I go to jail for it. You make a mistake, you go to jail for it. Anyone listening goes to jail for it. We can't be having a conversation about equality and it not be equal, and that there's two sets of laws, two sets of accountability, of standards of accountability, and that's really what we're facing here, right? I mean, and you know why it makes me mad, Max? Because remember when my brother died. Oh my gosh, I tried to get to the bottom of it. I tried to get information. Yeah. You filed an open records request.
Yeah, I tried to get the dash cam footage because he got drove off the road by a police officer. I tried to get the dash cam footage. I tried to get the dash cam footage, and what they told me was that you had no right because I was operating on your behalf. You had no right to it because there was an active investigation. Well, we knew that the officers involved weren't being investigated. They had already been cleared. and your brother was at that point deceased. So there was no one who could have been under investigation, but they used that excuse in Virginia as an excuse not to give the dash cam footage.
And it's
Virginia
taken 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years.
Virginia has some of the weakest public records laws because there's so many exceptions. And again, I'll say, when we first heard about this in May, it got drowned out by the George Floyd situation and kind of was just being presented as a he said, she said. And we're seeing from this that, it doesn't look like a good shoot. People writing in, Audrey writes, can we watch it in slow motion? I thought about putting this in slow motion, Audrey. And the reason that I didn't was because I don't believe, and people are free to disagree, I don't believe that it's valuable to judge police officers based off of slow motion body camera footage. I think that we should judge police officers' actions based on the full speed, real time footage that they would have seen. Police officers don't have slow-mo vision, right? They're seeing exactly what you're seeing. So we thought about it. We chose not to put it in slow motion for that reason. Because when you go in slow motion, you say, oh, obviously the police officer did it because see that one frame out of 2,000? That must have been what the officer saw, when the human eye can't possibly see that many frames per second. The human eye, I think, is limited to 60 frames per second. And we don't have slow motion vision. So that's why we didn't. But we will play it one more time, and then we'll keep going with the footage. Let's go ahead and play cut 2 one more time.
How you doing? Whoa! Put hands! Holy back away from the gun.
So, yeah, it's hard to see because they blur it. They blur it, and you understand why they blur it, because this is a man being shot and killed, and I'm glad that they. And Audrey just wrote in, I agree, thanks for responding. Thank you, Audrey. The reason they blur it is obvious. This is a man being shot and killed. If the police department didn't blur this, we would have blurred it. But what you can see right before the blur happens is that this man had both of his knees on the ground and was raising his arms up like that. He was shot in the back by a police officer who was hiding next to the door. Now, I understand if they were doing a drug bust, and if they were doing a drug bust and they knew that this guy was a hardened criminal, I'd understand police officers standing to the side of the door, because a lot of times when they do those drug raids, there are shotguns that get fired through the door, right? I understand that. But they approached the door laughing about how they were being called to a bogus domestic violence call by someone who just wanted to get them there as fast as possible and was willing to say yes to all of the questions. So they went in with a frame of mind that was very different from what you'd see on an actual drug raid. They knew that this was not a domestic violence situation. They were laughing about it. So when they hid on the side of the door, I don't know, maybe this is a rough area. Maybe it is. Who knows? But they didn't. I just see so many things that they did that made it impossible for this guy to see it was police. And even when he noticed it, despite all of their efforts to hide themselves, he got to the ground and he was still shot anyway. It's just...
So Doug writes in, be careful, this is not a good video. It don't show what the second cop saw, or for that matter, a good view of what the first cop saw. So, Doug, I want to tell you something. I mean, I'm going to respect that you're telling me that, but we're seeing. It's
fair, but it shows him on the ground on his knees. It shows that he was holding the gun in his right hand. So the cop that shot him was on his left behind him. He gets down on his knees and he's putting his hands up. I have a hard time imagining that the cop on his left would have seen anything different with the gun, because the cop on his right had the best view of the gun. And it was down at his side. He drops to his knees, puts his hands up, and he's shot.
But
I agree that...
But I want to point something out to Doug, right? Doug, it's valid. It's valid. But if you or me or anyone else would have shot and killed a man and said I had a different perspective, we still would have been charged. We still would have had to go to court. We still would have been judged by 12 people on a jury. See, my problem is not with the fact that they might have made a mistake or he might have seen it differently. My problem is that we actually get charged for this. We get charged for mistakes that we make, right? He's not even being charged. There's no charges pending. There's no jury to actually adjudicate this case. There's none of that can happen because it's never even brought to the point where we could actually figure out if what they did was, in fact, murder, right, or manslaughter, at a minimum manslaughter. But
manslaughter.
But we would have been charged. There's not one of us that would have gotten away with not being charged. Not one of us.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were knocking on someone's door and they responded with a gun down at their side, not pointing at you, you would be charged with murder if you shot and killed them.
100%.
You just would.
Maybe not.
And I think
maybe it would have been manslaughter. Maybe. Right? But you would have been charged. You've been charged with something to hold you accountable, because saying it's a mistake, oops, is not enough. It's just not.
Yeah.
And
we'll hear that they didn't even admit it was a mistake. They didn't even say sorry during the video. I mean, I understand why they're trained not to, because then it opens them up for liability. I want to put this image up because some people are asking about the 911 call. Let's put up image number 2. This is the 911 call as reported by local media, and I'll read it out for everyone listening. I can tell they're just at each other's throats down there, said a man on one of the 2 911 calls released by Phoenix police. In the second 911 call, the caller told 911 dispatchers the incident could be physical. Does it sound like it's escalated to any physical, or still just sounds verbal? Asked the 911 dispatcher. And the caller said, oh, it could be physical. I could say, yeah, if that makes anybody hurry up on get over here any faster. The man on the second 911 call replied, I hear slamming of doors, and I don't know, somebody could be getting thrown into a door for all I know, but I hear all kinds of banging. That's what he said. He didn't say there's a domestic violence situation. She said, is it getting physical? And he said, oh, it could be. There's doors being slammed. Maybe someone's getting pushed into a door, right? That's not a domestic violence call. That's a man just saying whatever it takes to get the police there because he's angry about people making noise late at night. And the cops, as we played in the first clip, are laughing about it, that this guy was just saying yes to all the questions just to try and get them there faster.
You know what? Okay, sorry, Max. Go ahead. No.
Well, no, give one more take, and then we'll play, because we have a bunch more footage. This goes on for a while. Go ahead, give your take on it.
So, I look at this particular case, and I want to go back to George Floyd. So there was a moment in time, and obviously the media's portrayal of it up to the point where George Floyd had a knee put on his back for neck for 9 minutes. Up until that point, the media didn't portray that correctly, right? But there was a moment in time that there was absolute solidarity between Black Lives Matter, what happened to George Floyd, and 100%, near 100% of the entire United States. There was a point.
Well, there was solidarity in that George Floyd shouldn't have been killed, and we still think that he shouldn't have been killed, right?
Right.
I don't think that there has ever been solidarity between conservatives and Black Lives Matter, the organization, but there was agreement that what happened to him was horrible.
Right. But
yeah.
And so we're seeing another example of, solid. People have to come together. I mean, look, you have to look at this for what it is and just say, listen, just equally apply the law. Just equally apply the law. And frankly, I think 99% of the country would agree equal application of the law, regardless of the position you're in. But there's favorites, right? There's handshakes and backdoor dealings and things like that happen. Yeah. And this is just another one of those examples, right?
And we're going to listen. We're going to listen to how the cops portrayed it, not only just to his significant other, but also we get some of the footage towards the end of the cop explaining what happened to other police officers, and they're lying. They're claiming that he lunged out of he whipped open the door and lunged out with the gun. That's not true. He answered the door with a gun down by his side, had a flashlight shining in his face. No one ever said police. Instead, they were just yelling hands at him. He got down on the ground, put his hands up, and he still was shot in the back. I want to play this next clip because his significant other comes out and is basically berating the police officer, saying, what did you do? Why did you do this? And this is what most of the body camera footage shows. They left him, Joe, moaning on the ground, dying. And I think that's where it really strikes me. It'd be one thing if they shot him, realized they made a mistake, and immediately started rendering medical assistance. that would speak to their mindset, that they understood they made a mistake. Even if they didn't make a mistake, they're supposed to render immediate medical aid. They didn't. And even when his significant other asked, even when he's moaning on the ground dying, they still didn't. Let's go ahead and play cut 3, and then we'll get your reaction, Joe. Let's play cut 3.
Get back and get out here. Come out here. Come out. I'm not going to shoot you. Come out here. Come out here. Over here. Over here. Get down on your knees. Get down on your knees. Get down on your knees. Just get down. Just get down. Relax. Out the 998? I did. Okay. Right here, right here, right here, right here. Come on, come with me, come with me. Hey, get back. Jerome, go back inside, go back inside.
So that noise you're hearing is him struggling to breathe, bleeding out on the ground. And, you hear the cop say, did you put out the 998? 998 is a call, officer involved shooting. A 999 would be officer shot. A 998 is that an officer shot someone else. So apparently the officer said he did call it in on the radio that he shot someone else. So that's supposed to be the second most important call that can go off the radio. Obviously, officer down would be the most important call that gets everyone there. Someone else being shot by a police officer is the second most important call to go out over the radio, get a response. You hear him. I think it was the other officer. So when we hear people writing in the comment section, we need the other officer's perspective. You can hear the other officer when she asks, "Why did you shoot him?" He says, "He pulled a gun on us, ma'am." That just isn't true. He answered the door with a gun at his side. Pulling a gun on us suggests that he had a gun in his holster in his waistband. He pulled it out. Right, that's what pulling a gun means. He didn't do that. Like so many people in America, when they have banging on their door late at night, he answered the door with a gun in his hand. He never pointed it at anyone. So when he says they pulled a gun on us, that has a very real definition. That means you pulled the gun out of your holster, out of your waistband, and on us means you pulled it on them. That didn't happen. That was a lie. So even this close to the shooting, they're still changing the narrative. Now, maybe that's what they thought, what they saw, but it isn't true. And that's why we play this in full speed, because in half speed, you probably could justify some of the things they're saying. But there's no way, shape, or form that they could have possibly interpreted this as him pulling a gun on them. They just can't. Joe, you there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good.
It's it's tough, right? And I know in your, I didn't think about this when I picked the topic, but in your situation, this brings back memories. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't even think that this would hit that close to home, but it's just incredible when you see her standing there screaming out, and they're just lying and just making up excuses for shooting a man in the back who was on his knees with his hands up. It's I don't know. It's incredible. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I'm going to tell you, they watched my brother bleed out, and you know, it's incredibly hard. You know, you just want accountability, right? You want there to be equal treatment. You want there to be accountability in every part of society. You want it to be fair and equal, and it's just not. It's just not fair and equal, and you know, at times where we can actually shine a light on a lack of accountability, I think we owe it to. I think we owe it to Ryan. We owe it to Clint. We owe it to other people.
Yeah, no, it's this video keeps getting worse because let's play we'll play the next clip. His girlfriend, significant other. I'll research it in this one, so I stop getting it wrong. But this clip, she asked if she can help him, and she asked if she can go over to him as he's lying on the ground dying, and the cop says no. Let's play cut 4.
Back inside. Is there anybody else in the house?
There's nobody else in the house.
The gun is right there on the floor. Just stay right here.
Baby.
No, you need to stay right there. There's nobody else in the house? There's nobody else in the house?
Stick with me. Baby, you're
Hey. Just relax. Stay right there.
There's nobody else in the house.
Okay, fine.
Why did you
Okay.
come and knock on the door? What's the problem?
Neighbors called, said you guys were arguing and fighting.
There was fighting over here.
I knocked on the door. I yelled, Phoenix
There
police.
was no fight.
He opened the door with a gun. It's okay. It's okay.
It's not. This is not.
435 Lincoln. Just so you know, we are code 4. The subject is down,
Baby, stay
and we
with
got the
me.
female party separated.
Baby, bring it, please.
You want to take her away?
Yeah.
Take me
Okay.
away.
You need to just come with me. Okay. We just want to clear away from the scene. That's all. Okay. Come on with me.
It's tough. It's people asking where did this happen? This happened in Phoenix, Arizona. When this happened in May, the body camera footage was released in July, and as we mentioned earlier, this kind of got overshadowed by the George Floyd protest. The family is now demanding more accountability, more transparency. The woman who is her crying, I just confirmed, she is his girlfriend. People asking, is the uncensored video available on the internet? I don't think so. The local police released this body camera footage, and they did the censoring, not us. So they're the ones adding the blurring. They're the ones adding the black bars. They're the ones bleeping out the curse words, not us. That's a decision that they made in releasing the body camera footage to the public. So I don't know if there is an uncensored view. I hope there isn't, because anyone who's shot and killed by police in this manner, I would pray to God that there is not a video footage unblurred of them dying on the ground, wrenching like this. I pray to God that video doesn't exist.
And then you could tell when he got to the point where he just stopped breathing.
Well, no, he keeps moaning.
Oh my God!
This goes on for minutes.
And nobody got him any help. Nobody rendered him any help. Nobody did anything.
We've cut this up a little bit, so we don't have to play the whole video, because the whole video I think is like 8 or 9 minutes. But this is a couple minutes since they shot him, and you'll notice that they still have not rendered any aid. They haven't tried to put pressure on the bleeding. They haven't tried to roll him over. Said, "Hey, it's okay. You're going to make it." Police officers are trained to do this. When an officer shoots someone, they're supposed to render aid, even if the person was trying to kill them. Like once they've determined that there's no one else there, they're supposed to render aid. And now you can see the officers are like checking in the house. Is there anyone else there? This woman's screaming, "There's no one else there. It's just me and him." I'm just shocked that no one has rendered any aid at this point. They've called on the radio twice so far in the video. It's tough to watch, and I'll say it again. We're asking that you share this video, not because we want people to see this, but because we believe people need to see this. Because this was a shooting that, as we mentioned, took place just before George Floyd was killed, and this did not get nearly as much attention. Now, we can hypothesize why. Maybe it's because he's white. Maybe it's because he was a gun owner. Who knows? But this case deserves more attention than it's getting. And again, if anyone's seeing something different than us, feel free to call in 888-441-1121. Go ahead, Joe.
And if you're watching it on Podbean or Apple, you can actually come to Facebook and watch it today. You can actually see the footage. It will be the podcast will be on both YouTube and on Facebook and on Parler, so you can actually watch it and a couple other places, but those are the main places. that you can actually come and watch the videos. You can make a decision for yourself if you're just joining us later. So this is a somber subject for me. It is crushing to see someone lose their life in this way. It's even more crushing that they didn't actually do something or show any humanity in doing it. And I think that when I talk about being torn between good and bad, good police officers, bad police officers, obviously I was at the Back the Blue rally. I do support the police, and I do a lot to support them because they're from our communities, right? So, but the other side is that I recognize that there's some angst, and frankly, I grew up with angst. I mean, I grew up in an area where, 5-0 meant something where I grew up, right? If it wasn't for sports and it wasn't for education, it wasn't for, getting an opportunity to get out of a impoverished environment that I grew up in, I would tell you that I'd still have that angst towards police officers. But, there has to be a way that we can actually bring humanity, whether it's more training. I mean, I don't even know what the answer is, right? I just know that the DA and the judges and the system has to be blinder to who is it that's being charged. It has to be able to say, look, right or wrong, I can look at this no other way than to say, listen, at a minimum, it's second-degree murder. At a maximum, it's second-degree murder. At a minimum, it's manslaughter. And I'm sorry that you have to go to jail for killing a man, but you killed a man, right? And you killed him in cold blood. You can say whatever you want. They killed this guy in cold blood. Ryan Whitaker died in cold blood at their hands. Say what you want. That's truth. That's absolute truth. And
we see cases like this where, like, people are you always hear stories about this. Like, people are open carrying in a supermarket, and the call comes in that someone's in the store with a gun, and the police come and they act like he's like trying to rob the store, right? If you have a right to carry a gun, if you have a right to have a gun in your hand, that right doesn't go away simply because there's a police officer nearby. If he had pointed the gun at officers, yes. If someone points a gun at a police officer or points anything that even can be remotely, assumed to be a gun, a cap gun, anything, I'm the first person to stand up and say that the police officer has a right to defend himself if he has a reasonable belief that someone's pointing a weapon at him. But this isn't one of those situations. The guy went down on his knees. He put his hands up, and they shot him in the back. Let's keep playing this. It gets worse. This part is where his girlfriend explained to cops that they were not fighting. They were actually playing PlayStation, a game called Crash Bandicoot, making salsa, and they were getting a little bit excited about the game. And we'll hear again in this clip that the cop lies about why he was shot. Let's play cut 5.
This is crazy because literally the other night he heard knocking on the door, and he was looking through the peephole, and he does have a gun on him.
Yeah, he does. He came to the door with it. And I'm not saying that he did anything wrong, but he just...
But did he pull it on you guys?
He had it out, and when he saw it was us, he hit it behind his leg, and he started walking at me. I drew out on him. I was on him, but I didn't shoot. My partner shot.
That's not true.
So,
that is absolutely not true.
This is just like a flashback from the other night. He
Was
said that
anything going on inside? Because your neighbor called saying that he heard you guys going at it. Arguing, fighting?
Literally, we were making salsa and playing Crash Bandicoot, so there may have been some screaming from PlayStation, but it's it wasn't domestic violence or anything.
Okay. Well, and that's how the call came out. And that's why we knocked on your door.
Baby!
Lie after lie after lie. That is not how the call came out. We listened at the first part of the video of the cops laughing about how it was a bogus domestic violence call and how the guy just said whatever he thought he had to say to get the cops there faster. This was not a legitimate domestic violence call. It wasn't. No. The cops knew that. That is a lie. She asked him, did he pull the gun on you? And you can hear the cop pauses, and he said he had it on him. That is very different than what his partner said just seconds earlier, claiming he pulled the gun on us and we had to shoot him. He had a gun. He had every right to have a gun standing in the threshold of his home when you're pounding on his door late at night and when he is hiding out of view so he can't see who's there through the peephole. And then when he opens the door, you shine a flashlight in his eyes. And you never yell police. You just say hands. So many problems with this. And then you hear them saying, well, were you yelling? Was it true? Like trying to justify the fact that they just killed this man who was standing in the threshold of his home.
So DeMichael says he died being a tough guy who walks through the door with a gun. I do. I walk through the door with a gun. Max, you walk to the door with a gun. You walk to the door with a gun. Wait. You walk to the door with a gun. Here's what happened. I can in my mind, I can play it, and maybe it's not exactly what happened, and I probably shouldn't say this. This is my interpretation of what happened. He walked to the door. They're standing away from the door to the edges, so you can't be seen on the peephole. He looked through the peephole, didn't see anyone, right? Then he went and got his gun, grabbed his gun, came back to the door, opened the door, right? But they were out of plain sight. Had they been in plain sight at the door, had they been able to see that it's a police officer, he never would have come to the door with a gun. He just wouldn't have, right?
Yeah. People are saying in the YouTube comments, one person saying, not smart, answering the door with a gun. I disagree. I mean, I probably wouldn't open the door. I would shout, who is it? But late at night, someone's pounding on my door, and I'm not expecting visitors. I go to the door with a gun. Absolutely. It's just, what's the point of owning a gun for home defense if the moment someone starts banging on your door uninvited late at night, you don't at least carry a gun to the door to see what's going on?
I would not have opened the door. I'm with you. I would not have opened the door. I would have actually done a threat assessment, immediately done a threat assessment. I would have said, who is it, through the door. I would have told someone to show themselves, right? Hey, but I'm not opening the door unless you can show yourself, right? At that point, I would have done it. So, and again, that's also, I mean, I'm going to say it, on Ryan's part, that's poor, and I think this is probably what DeMichael is probably getting at, right? Is that's poor training on his side. That's poor just understanding of situational awareness. I agree, but that's no reason to get killed. As soon as he saw the police officers when he opened the door, he put the gun down, he put his hand up, right? He showed that, hey, look, I'm not a threat, right? So regardless of that, I'm telling you that there's no justification for it. And I'm not even telling you, as you said, that they're bad police officers. Now, the guy that killed my brother was a bad police officer. He was a bad police. He has three separate incidences where Internal Affairs actually investigated him for abuse, right? For, let's not call it abuse, for aggravated circumstances where he violated the rights of others. 3, right? At 90 miles an hour, he knocked my brother off of a motorcycle on a traffic stop. Now, my brother, just like Ryan probably shouldn't open the door, probably shouldn't have had a gun in his hand, probably shouldn't know the stage, probably should have better situation awareness, right? But that doesn't mean you kill the guy. It doesn't mean you kill my brother. It doesn't mean that you don't make an assessment to say, listen, let's live to see another day. Let the guy go at 90 miles an hour and pick him up the next day for not stopping on a stop, right? What happens in my brother's standpoint is that ego crept in and he decided, I'm going to teach this guy a lesson. Well, yeah, you taught him a lesson. You killed him. That's a great lesson. You should be proud of yourself for murdering another human being and then having your department and your union rep and your lawyer lie, right? And in this case, they started lying immediately, right? Instead of just not talking and rendering aid, doing the things that they should have done, they didn't do those things, right? And they shot the guy in the back. No matter what you say, if you shoot a person in the back, you're going to jail. Sorry, Max, it's going to happen. The second you shoot him in the back, you're going to jail.
Rhonda writes in in the Facebook comments, should the neighbor be charged? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's one we need to talk about.
In most states, they have laws on the books against what's called swatting. So if you don't know what swatting is, it's actually something that happens in the video game community where people are playing video games, and if someone doesn't like that they beat them at the video game, they call the police on their opponent and claim that he has a gun or he's dangerous. When that happens, the person who made the call is liable. So what really depends here is whether or not they knew that or not. We do have a caller. I don't want to forget about it. We do have Robert on the line who is of a different opinion. Robert, how's it going?
Good. So I just wanted to call in. You know, after listening to Joe speak, I just want to first off say that I didn't know anything before this about his brother, and sending condolences. I know it's probably been a while, but I just, after hearing him, I do have to agree. I think there's a difference between malpractice and negligence. even in the medical community. I think this was something that was not intended, and that, it's a spur of the moment thing, wasn't necessarily thought out through. The guy obviously was armed. He did have a gun on him. It looked in the video to me that he's potentially holding it. Should they have shot him? No, but it's really, a moment. In comparison, we're comparing it to George Floyd. The guy had his knee on the neck for 9 minutes or so straight. And so there's a big difference between thinking something through and then spur of the moment. The guy had a gun on him. He's armed, obviously. Maybe he didn't hear that they were knocking and saying Phoenix Police Department. I'm hoping that's what happened, that they knocked before. And I understand what you were saying about not standing in the doorway. They didn't knock. Is that what you're saying?
They did knock, and they said Phoenix Police as they were knocking. His girlfriend in these videos and later in talking to reporters had said he didn't hear that. He didn't know who was at the door. They had people ding-dong ditching on the door in the past, pounding on the door late at night. So he was very on edge about people banging on his door late at night, and that's why he was bringing a gun to the door. The problem with this is he had you mentioned that he was armed, right? That to me is irrelevant because he had a right to be armed. It was his house. It was the threshold of his house, the doorway. He has every right to answer the door armed. That right doesn't disappear.
I agree. I'm not saying that the shooting is justified. I'm not saying the shooting is justified, but there's a difference between, and Joe pointed out, a bad cop that's having intent to harm intentionally before showing up to the scene or showing up to the scene and saying, I'm going to shoot somebody today, and a difference between a cop that's in fear for his life and made an accident. And I understand this is a deadly accident, and that accident took somebody's life.
That's why we're talking about the difference between manslaughter and second-degree murder. Second-degree murder is intentional. He pointed the gun, pulled the trigger. It's obviously intentional, but it wasn't premeditated. He didn't show up saying, I'm going to kill this guy. So that's why we're talking about the difference between second-degree murder, which is intentional,
but there's also self-defense,
or manslaughter.
Yes, but self-defense is the thought, not necessarily that your life is in danger, that the thought that your life is in danger.
Correct.
So the police officer could have thought that his life was in danger. And it's obviously, to me, it looks like an accident. It doesn't look like an intentional, obviously it's intentional once the point that the officer thought their life was in danger. But thinking about it from the cops' perspective, they could have thought that their life was in danger. They see a guy with a gun, maybe, obviously he is kneeling, which you are pointing, and he could be even putting the gun away or trying to drop it. But in the moment, in the spur of the moment, the cop is thinking this person has a gun, they have a gun in their hand. And so their reaction is to eliminate the threat.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with you at all, Robert. I don't disagree with you. My point is that the justice should be equally dispersed, right? And if it was you or I that did that and said in the spur of the moment we thought this, we would still be charged. We would be charged for that.
Well, I actually don't know because it's self-defense. Because it is at that point self-defense.
No. It's not self-defense. So, in order for it to be self-defense, the gun has to be brandished. Saying it's self-defense means that anytime you see someone open carrying, you have the right to just shoot them in the back, right? That's not self-defense. If he had brandished the gun, which means you're actually using it in a threatening manner, which means you're pointing it at someone in a way it's readily dischargeable in a manner that would cause harm or deadly force. That's what brandishing is.
Yeah, right? But brandishing it does not mean necessarily self-defense. I think I disagree with you on that because the guy is holding it. It's different if it's in his holster and his hands are up, but the guy was holding his gun, correct? Or maybe I saw on the video.
He has every right to. He has every right to, right?
See, that's the problem.
I know, but from the police officer's perspective, he has the right to. Don't get me wrong, he has the right to. He's in his own home. He's opening the door. From the police officer's perspective, you also have to think, obviously it's a horrible situation that neither party wants to be put into. But the police officer responding to a call, that they knock on the door, identifying that they're the police, a guy with a gun in his hand shows up, it's an unfortunate scenario that hopefully doesn't happen. But thinking from the cop's perspective, he just has to think. Go ahead.
I'll tell you why this wasn't self-defense, because self-defense is a universal concept. It applies equally to individuals and cops. If a civilian had knocked on someone's door late at night and they answered the door with a gun, the civilian would not be within his rights or her rights to shoot them dead. I was, not too long ago, last year, my wife bought something online and I went to go pick it up at someone's house. She gave me the wrong address. I go up to the door. It's an old lady holding a shotgun. She's not expecting visitors, didn't like that I was ringing the doorbell trying to pick up a piece of furniture she had bought online. Woman answers the door with a shotgun. Now, I don't have a right to draw my concealed weapon, which I had on my side, and shoot her dead. She's in her house with a shotgun. She's concerned, right?
Right.
His rights don't end where the cops' fears begin, right? If a civilian would not have been within their legal rights to shoot, then the cops aren't either. The cops don't have special rights when it comes to people holding a gun in their own domicile.
So I mean, on 2 points there, I think that the self-defense is based on not if your life was in danger, which, it's whether you think your life is in immediate danger or bodily harm. And that's my understanding of self-defense, is if you perceive or think that. And it's a little different, I guess, the civilian that's showing up versus somebody, law enforcement, that's part of their job to actually show up. It's obviously, I think we could easily agree that it was their job to show up that day at that time for that call. Obviously not to shoot, but it's a little different than a random person showing up too.
So to finish up, and thank you for your call.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to just get it out there. This happened in Arizona. Let me just read off what Arizona's self-defense and use of deadly force laws require. And it says, a person is justified in threatening or actually using physical force, including deadly force, if a reasonable person would believe that the force is immediately necessary to protect themselves from the other person's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force. So if he had brandished the gun, if he had pointed the gun, I would completely understand it. But I don't buy that argument, because that suggests that I'm not a reasonable person, right? To say that they were justified in shooting is to say that we have all of these people watching today and everyone would just agree that it's a good shoot. If you go through the comment section, some people understand where the cops are coming from, but the vast majority of people commenting on our stream today are saying that, no, this was messed up. He was on his knees. He had his hands up. It was not a good shoot. So to say that it's a self-defense is to call me, call Joe, call a bunch of our listeners unreasonable, because a reasonable person would have identified that he was threatening the officers. When I don't see that. I don't see a lunge. I don't see him whipping the door open, as we're about to hear. I see him getting down on his knees. I see him putting his hands up. That's why the law is written in that way. It's written that it's justified to be used if a reasonable person could basically believe that it was necessary. And all of us are watching this. Some disagree, but the vast majority seem to believe that it was not necessary. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's the reasonableness of charging them, right? I mean, just use the same criteria and say, would you charge someone if they weren't a police officer? Just take that criteria out. And if you come to the conclusion that you would charge them if it wasn't a police officer, you must charge them, right? And so I think that's my biggest issue, is that I'm more than willing to let a jury decide, look at that information, 12 of them, right? Come up with be charged, go through the process, right, of going through and being charged with manslaughter, being charged with second-degree murder. You choose, right? I mean, there should just be some accountability. And beyond that, they should never be able to keep their job after this. I mean, regardless, these police officers still have their jobs. They should never be able to keep their jobs, right? They should be fired immediately.
And that's not saying that this was necessarily premeditated. Police officers are given extra rights and privileges because they're trusted with using deadly force, right? If someone has proven that they cannot be trusted with those privileges, then they've proven that they can't be trusted with the badge. And that's not anything negative on them. If they made a mistake, fine, but plenty of people make mistakes and get fired too.
Right. You don't get to go backwards on it. You don't get to, yeah.
So we have more clips that we got to play. We just watched his girlfriend basically say we weren't in a fight. The cop lied to her, saying that he pulled his gun out. A bunch of lies. This next clip, and we're playing this sequentially. The only things we've cut out is a couple of seconds of dead air. This is where the girlfriend asks if she can go over and be with her boyfriend as he is laying on the ground, groaning and dying, and the police officer says no. Let's play cut 6.
Am I able to check to make sure he's okay?
Is that?
Can I please?
No, you can't go back over there. You can't go back over there. Okay? I'm sorry.
Are you able to escort me over there to make sure he's okay?
I can't.
If I stay here, can you please go make sure he's okay?
I want to do that. I want to do that for you.
You can contain me right here.
Sweet, I want to do that for you, but I'm leaning towards the fact that he's not. Okay.
He's not okay.
He's
Where'd
not.
you shoot him?
I didn't shoot him. My partner shot him because he came at us with a gun. He came out of the apartment and walked towards us with a gun in his hand. I don't know what he's going to do, and he yelled some noise and yelled some words, whatever it was. I don't know what it was, but.
He's lying. He's lying for her.
I don't actually.
He did not yell anything at them.
He didn't say a word.
He didn't rush towards officers. Seeing someone with a gun in their hand is not the legal standard to deploy deadly force. It just isn't. It has to be used in a way that a reasonable, as we just read, a reasonable person would believe that someone's life would be in danger. And a gun at someone's side, pointed down, is not a danger to anyone. It's a first floor apartment. There's no one living below them. You can't argue that it's a danger to anyone, right? He's lying, claiming that he came out with a gun, came at them with a gun, that he shouted something to them, claiming, she's begging, can I go see if he's okay? And he says no. And she's saying, if I stay here, can you go see if he's okay? And he says, I want to do that, but I can't. And then
I'm
it's
leaning
so heartless.
I'm leaning towards he's not okay.
Yeah, he
I
said,
mean, why would you say that? Why would you say that to a person?
Like, how is that by the book? Can you go check on him? No, but I'm going to lean towards he's not okay. How do you say that?
Why would you
someone?
say that to a person? Why? How? How could you? Why? Exactly. Why? Why would you say that to a person? I think that's my issue is that none of this makes sense. Like the whole entire scenario doesn't make sense. The entire scenario.
You can see, and I don't want to. Yeah, Sherry writes, this is exactly why it needs to go to grand jury. You're right, Sherry.
100%.
I don't want to speak to what's in this guy's mind, but there's too many lies being told. Officers are trained in the heat of the moment to remember what's happening. So there's like old studies where they forced people to all watch some kind of event, and then they gave them a quiz to explain what happened.
Right.
And most people, when you see something and you're not expecting and your adrenaline goes up, they don't catch the important details. Police officers are trained to make sure that they catch the important details. If a crime's being committed, they make sure to look for the license plate, right? Police officers are trained to be better suited to retell tragic and stressful events in accuracy. And what we're hearing here is a lot of lies. It's not even up for interpretation. This guy did not lunge at them with a gun. He did not rush at them with a gun. He did not shout something at them.
No.
He
didn't.
walked through the threshold of his home and checked to see who was there.
Yeah, this is just where, I mean, let's watch the next clip. Let's watch the next clip. Let's move on to the next clip.
So this is the last clip, and this is where the cop is explaining to another officer what he thinks happened. And spoiler alert, he keeps lying. We'll play this clip, but before we do, I'll say it again. Please do hit the like button. Please do hit the share button. Please continue to leave comments. More people need to see this, and we're not doing this because we want people to see this. I hope that no one would have to see something this tragic. We're doing this because people need to see this. The media isn't doing a good enough job. Let's go ahead and play cut 7.
She says, so the guy upstairs calls. So when he calls back, they hot it out. And while we're on the way, dispatcher says, just so you guys know, weren't able to get any further info from the complainant. He says, he just is going to answer yes to all the questions. He just wants the cops here now. Okay, great. Thanks for that. You know, so we come walking up to the.
So they muted this part so you don't get to hear the address, but that's why this part's muted. It'll come back in a second.
I pull to the left of the door. Jeff's on the right of the door. Stand there. The door comes whipping open. I'm like, oh, yelled something, and then I saw a gun in his hand. So I yelled, gun. Throw out.
He didn't yell gun.
He didn't?
He did
And
not.
the guy started going down, so I was like, well, I don't have to fire. Yeah. Would have. I mean, he took 2 steps out of the door. I mean, it was like door, oh, gun, and then he went like that, and I was just like, whoa, getting ready to come in and squeeze. Yeah.
It's a good thing you're SWAT.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think at the end he said it's a good thing you're SWAT. If that's what he said, I hadn't heard that when I listened to it before. If that's what he said, then this is even worse. Because SWAT officers are supposed to have more training to know not to just shoot someone because they're holding a gun at their side. More lies saying.
But he also didn't
the door
say
open.
that. Thank God you're SWAT. He didn't say that either.
Yeah. The other officer he was talking to at the end of that video, I think I heard he quipped and said, "Thank God you're SWAT." But the officer lied. He's continued lying. The door wasn't whipped open. This was the guy answering his door to you pounding on it in the middle of the night. He didn't rush you with a gun. It's just, it's hard to justify any of this. And you just, if he is that confused about what happened, then he shouldn't be a police officer. If you cannot accurately depict why you just shot someone, like as you mentioned, Joe, he tells the other officer that he yelled gun. We'll play it again. At no point did he yell gun.
No.
He yelled hands. He yelled hands. So if he yelled gun, I would understand that the other officer would be more afraid, right? So the guy walks out of his house. He's holding a gun in his right hand. The officer on his right, if he had yelled gun, then the other officer would have known there was a gun. But he didn't yell gun. He yelled hands. So that kind of blows up the whole theory that the other officer who actually did the shooting knew what was going on. Because he wasn't told there was a gun. He would have only been able to see the gun as the guy is putting his hands up. Right? That's the only time that the cop on the right would be able to see that there was a gun. When his hands are up. The guy who shot would not have been able to see the gun down and at the guy's right side because he was on the left. And because the officer never yelled gun, again, the only time he would have saw it was when his hands were up.
Correct.
So he shot a guy with his hands up.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I mean, and again, Max, we're not even halfway through we're not all the way through the footage.
We're
a couple more.
We're all the way through it.
We're
all the way through it now. There was some more footage, but it was just dead space of them walking down the hallway, not talking. So we didn't play that. But every part where they actually said something, we've played. And I
think didn't he pass away? Didn't Ryan pass away there? He never made it to the hospital.
I don't think he made it to the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, they shot him in the back from feet away 2 or 3 times. He was on the floor groaning out in pain for minutes before anyone even gave him any aid. I don't even know if they gave him aid. Because, again, we don't have the other officer's body camera footage. We know that he didn't give aid within the first 2 or 3 minutes. And when seconds count, when you're bleeding out on the floor, and he's just leaving him there to die. No, it's
Yeah, I mean, I don't. So this just comes down to one thing that I want to say, and that is, we have to establish integrity in the system. And unfortunately, more often than not, we hear these stories, and it's not related to being black or brown or Asian. That's not the problem. I mean, you want to create that problem, make yourself the victim. The reality of it is the victim is the American people because of this unequally yoked application of justice. That's really what we're up against right now. We're not up against, a rash of racism. Racism today is at an all-time low, not an all-time high. I mean, I truly believe that there are 1%, maybe 2% of our country that are racist. I think 98% of the country literally doesn't care what color you are. And
I think that's even a little high, but yeah.
But let's give it the benefit of the doubt. But so we have all of these things that are created. We have all these things that are created as false narratives, this chaos, and we ignore real issues like this one. This is a real issue. My brother being killed, real issue. And they lied. Like I sat there and watched them lie. They lied over and over and over again. It's taken 3 years. This was done in May. Nobody even said one word about it because it didn't fit the narrative of that all white people are racist and white privilege and everything else. And by the way, I want to point this out. Do you know how long, Max, it would take if you just had, let's say it was half of 1%, 0.5%, how fast it would, and across the society, for 90% of the people in this country to have one bad experience every quarter with that one individual, with that 0.5%? You literally mathematically, I like math, mathematically speaking, you could literally create a bad experience, a racist experience, right? Literally every 90 days for every person in the United States. So when people say that, oh, I've been treated that way before, of course you have. Mathematically speaking, there's a high opportunity that a person comes into contact with 30,000 people every year, individually.
Except that's not. This has nothing to do with racism.
But that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we wanted to say that there's an issue over here that doesn't exist. It's a pink unicorn, right? The police are out there just beating and killing blacks is not the case. But police are getting away with things, and there's no system of accountability that holds them responsible. And it doesn't stop at the police. It's the DAs and the judges. They're just as complicit in the behavior. So adding accountability, maybe not accountability even for bad cops, just accountability that if you shoot someone, good cop, bad cop, doesn't matter, and you lie, that there's consequences. That's all I want. I just want consequences for this. I want us to stop looking at this as if we have to back every police officer who has bad behavior. I don't want to do that. I want to hold them accountable. I want this police officer charged. That's what I want. I want this police officer charged. And I don't care if it's manslaughter. They should be held accountable the same way we're held accountable as people. That's all I'm saying.
And that's the main takeaway as we finish this episode up. As we've talked about good cops, bad cops, a lot of what we hear is people say, well, cops are people too. They just want to get home safe to their families. And it's true. Cops just want to get home safe to their families. They are people too.
Yeah.
Their self-defense rights, they do not have any special self-defense rights over the average citizen. I mean, in blue states like New York and New Jersey, they do. But in a place like Arizona, they don't. The right that gives a cop to use deadly force is the same inherent right that allows a citizen to stand their ground.
Right.
The issue is that if a civilian did this, they'd be in prison already. If you knocked on someone's door, they answered with a gun, and you shot them for it in the threshold of their home, and you're a civilian, you'd be in prison for it. Listen, when that Georgia officer shot and killed the guy who pointed a taser at him, we defended him because the taser is a weapon that was pointed at him, and his right to return fire was an inherent right that every Georgia resident has, cop or civilian. If a gun's being pointed at you, a weapon's being pointed at you, you have the right to use deadly force to defend yourself, right? That's an inherent right regardless of whether you're a cop or not. The problem is that when cops make mistakes, we're being told that there's some special class of citizen that deserves extra rights, that deserves extra leeway. No, they killed a man in his doorway. He was in legal possession of a gun, and he was not holding it or pointing it in a threatening manner. Immediately upon realizing it was police officers, he got down on the ground and he put his hands up. And that is the point that he was shot in the back by an officer to his left and behind him at that point.
So Gavin says something. He's talking to DeMichael, and he says, yeah, you were right. George was resisting arrest, and he was on drugs that inhibit breathing. Doesn't excuse the fact he was held down on his chest for 8 minutes. But had he not been on drugs, he probably wouldn't have died. So there's a certain portion where you make bad choices, right? But a bad choice shouldn't result in your death, right? It just shouldn't. And I want to say that, regardless of the history, Ryan should have done a threat assessment. He should have. And if you're going to own a gun, go get training. We've talked about this before. Go get training. Right? Don't just open a door flamboyantly. Him being tough contributed to this. This mentality. So there's a little bit of truth.
I'm not putting anything on him.
I'm not putting anything on him either.
I've
Max, what I'm saying is that people should take this as a teaching moment, regardless of whether someone's charged.
Sure.
And the teaching moment is this. And if we didn't actually point it out, I can tell you right now, something bad could happen to someone else. When you go to a door and there's somebody's banging on your door, don't open it, right? And if you have a gun in your hands, find out who's at the door before you do open it. And if you don't know who's at the door, then you still have the gun, you're still in your house, right? Go to the phone, call the police, right? Yeah. Use every available option available to you in order to make a better decision. That's what I'm telling you, Max, is that people, any decision you made, anything that you've done previously, my brother ran from the police, but he shouldn't have been knocked off the bike at 90 miles an hour into a wall. He shouldn't have been, that should never have happened. It should never even been an option for the police officer. And I guess the same thing could be said here, is that if we can get anything out of this, hopefully they're charged. Matter of fact, they've got to be charged. I mean, this can't go on. Cases like this can't keep going on. But just take the time that if you're going to own a gun, to be trained, to be well trained. Train yourself, right? Go get proper training. Don't open your door, right, for anyone. And I guess that's the point, Max. That's the last thing I'll say about it, is that I was trying to point out that I can't put anything on him at all. The police officer is 100% in the wrong. I just want to see accountability. That's it. But at the same time, you've got to be smarter in this day and age. You have to be smarter if you're a gun owner and if you're a responsible citizen, and making sure you protect yourself.
Yeah, and I'll end with the biggest difference I see between this and George Floyd is that in George Floyd's case, the police were using an actual recommended detention technique. And that detention technique of putting your knee on someone's neck ended up killing him.
Right.
People have mentioned that he was high on fentanyl, which inhibits your breathing. He had COVID-19 in the past, inhibits your breathing. Right? He was high on other drugs, which could have contributed. They used a legal detention method, a recommended detention method, and someone died. That was branded as murder. And as we covered last week when we watched the body cam footage from George Floyd, it wasn't murder. He was resisting arrest from the moment police interacted with him. With this case, it seems like a cut and dry bad shoot, that they shot someone in the back who was on his knees putting his hands up. And yet, in that case, instead of calling a spade, we're told that, oh no, they did the right thing, even though you cannot find a single police manual in the country or a police instructor who teaches officers to shoot someone in the back when they're putting their hands up. So that's the biggest difference here for me. This shouldn't have happened. Whether or not he made mistakes, he was well within his rights every single second of that video to be in possession of a gun in the threshold of his house. And if we're going to live in a world where police can shoot you simply because you have a gun in your hand at your side, then open carry rallies just became a lot more dangerous. Hunting just became a lot more dangerous. Yep. Target shooting in public just became a lot more dangerous. Just walking to your mailbox with a gun on your hip just became a lot more dangerous. If that is the new standard of stand your ground, that if you just see a gun, even if it's not being pointed at you, you're justified in taking that person's life, then we have serious discussion we have to have on this, because I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in a world where the mere sight of a gun means that your right to possess it evaporates just because there's a cop in the vicinity. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. Make sure that you check out all the links in the description. Follow us on Google Play if you want to. Let's do it on Android, Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone. We're also on Podbean, TuneIn, Pandora, all the different places, so check it out. Also, we live stream on Facebook and YouTube every day, so if you're listening to the audio and you want to watch the actual video footage, check out our live streams on YouTube or Facebook. We're also on Parler at Conservative Daily. Follow us, and we'll be happy to follow you back there as well. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.